Victor Romano built an empire on secrets, but the one that should have killed his wife would instead destroy him. While he whispered promises to his mistress in silk sheets across town, Elena Romano lay dying on their penthouse floor, her phone ringing unanswered in her trembling hand. The doctors saved her body that night, but something else died in that hospital room. Something quiet, something patient, something far more dangerous than the woman Victor had betrayed, because the wife he thought he broke was about to teach him that some ghosts don't haunt, they hunt. If you're ready to see how a woman destroys the empire that betrayed her, stay until the end. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Elena's story reaches across the world. The October rain came down in sheets against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Romano penthouse, each drop catching the city lights 40 stories below like falling stars. Elena Romano stood in the kitchen, one hand pressed against the cool marble counter, the other clutching her phone. The pain in her chest had started 20 minutes ago, sharp, stealing her breath, making the edges of her vision blur. She had called Victor 3 times. 3 times. His phone had rung and rung before going to voicemail. "Victor," she whispered into the empty apartment, her voice barely audible over the rain. "Please." The pain intensified, spreading from her chest down her left arm. Elena's knees buckled, and she caught herself against the counter, her phone clattering to the marble floor. The screen cracked, but she could still see his name there. Victor. Her husband of 7 years, the man who had promised to protect her from everything. She reached for the phone with shaking fingers, but her vision was darkening now, the penthouse swimming around her. The last thing Elena saw before her world went black was the rain-streaked window reflecting her pale face, and beyond it, the indifferent glitter of the city that never stopped moving, never stopped living, even when you were dying alone. Man. Across town, in the Riverside Hotel's presidential suite, Victor Romano traced a lazy pattern down Selena Vale's bare spine, his mind already half-focused on the shipment arriving at the docks tomorrow. The woman in his bed stirred, turning to face him with those green eyes that had first caught his attention 6 months ago at a charity gala Elena had organized. "You're thinking about work," Selena murmured, her voice carrying that slight accent she'd picked up during her years in Paris. "I can always tell." Victor's phone buzzed on the nightstand, the 3rd time in 10 minutes. He glanced at the screen and saw Elena's name. His jaw tightened slightly, but he silenced it and set it back down. "Ignore it," Selena said, her fingers walking up his chest. "You're with me now." "I am," Victor agreed, though something uneasy shifted in his gut. Elena rarely called 3 times. She knew better than to interrupt his business meetings, or what he told her were business meetings. Selena sat up, the silk sheet pooling at her waist. Even now, after 6 months, the sight of her took his breath away. She was everything Elena wasn't, bold where his wife was reserved, passionate where Elena was gentle, demanding where Elena simply waited. "When are you going to tell her?" Selena asked, a question she'd been asking more frequently lately. "Tell her what?" "That you're leaving her, that you're choosing me." Selena's eyes held his, and there was something sharp beneath the desire. "How much longer are we going to pretend this is just an affair, Victor? We both know it's more than that." Victor's phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Elena's name on the screen, but a number he recognized, the doorman at his building. "I need to take this," he said, reaching for the phone, but Selena caught his wrist. "No," she said softly. "You need to choose." For a moment, Victor hesitated. In that moment, across town, his wife's heart was giving out on their kitchen floor. In that moment, everything that would come after was already set in motion, though he didn't know it yet. He pulled his wrist free and answered the phone. "Mr. Romano?" The doorman's voice was tight with urgency. "Sir, it's your wife. The paramedics just took her. She collapsed. They said it's her heart. St. Mary's Hospital. You need to come now." The phone nearly slipped from Victor's hand. "What?" "Your wife, sir. The ambulance just left. She wasn't conscious." Victor was already on his feet, grabbing his clothes from the floor. "When? How long ago?" "Maybe 20 minutes. They've been trying to reach you." Victor didn't hear the rest. His mind was racing back through the last hour. The 3 calls from Elena. The 3 calls he'd silenced while Selena traced patterns on his skin and asked him to choose. "Victor?" Selena's voice cut through his panic, sharp now, stripped of its earlier softness. "What's wrong?" "It's Elena." He was pulling on his pants, his shirt, his hands shaking. She's at the hospital. Her heart. So go, Selena said, but there was something cold in her tone now. Go play the devoted husband. Victor looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time since they'd started this, he saw something that made his blood run cold. Jealousy, yes, but beneath it, something darker. Something that looked almost like satisfaction. I have to go, he said. Of course you do. Selena pulled the sheet up to cover herself, suddenly modest. You always do, eventually. That's the problem, Victor. You keep one foot in her world and one in mine, and you think you can balance forever. But eventually you'll have to choose which one to stand in. Victor didn't answer. He was already heading for the door, his mind racing with images he couldn't shake. Elena alone in their apartment, trying to reach him. Elena collapsing. Elena in an ambulance, the paramedics fighting to keep her alive while He slammed the door behind him, Selena's words still echoing in his ears. The drive to St. Mary's should have taken 20 minutes. Victor made it in 12, running red lights, his Mercedes cutting through the rain-slicked streets like a knife. The whole time one thought pounded through his head. Please let her be alive, please. He'd built an empire on careful calculations and ruthless decisions. He'd ordered men killed with less emotion than he showed choosing wine. But the thought of losing Elena, quiet, gentle Elena, who'd never asked him for anything more than his presence, filled him with a terror that was entirely new. The emergency room was chaos when he arrived. Nurses rushing past, machines beeping, someone screaming in a curtained-off bay. Victor grabbed the first person in scrubs he saw. Elena Romano, my wife. She came in by ambulance. Her heart. Room 7, the nurse said, pulling free. They're still working on her. Victor ran. The emergency room corridor stretched endlessly before him, each second an eternity. When he reached room 7, he stopped in the doorway, his breath catching. Elena lay on the hospital bed, her face pale as death against the white sheets. Wires ran from her chest to machines that beeped steadily. An IV dripped clear fluid into her arm. A doctor and 2 nurses hovered over her, their movements quick and efficient, their voices low and urgent. BP stabilizing, one nurse said. Heart rate's coming up, the doctor responded. She's responding to the medication. Victor's knees nearly gave out. She was alive. Elena was alive. Mr. Romano? A different doctor appeared at his elbow, an older woman with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. I'm Dr. Chen. Your wife experienced a cardiac episode. We've stabilized her, but she's not out of danger yet. What happened? Victor's voice came out rough. She's only 32. She's healthy. Stress-induced cardiomyopathy, Dr. Chen said. Also called broken heart syndrome. It mimics a heart attack, but it's caused by severe emotional or physical stress. Her heart muscle temporarily weakened. If she hadn't gotten here when she did... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Broken heart syndrome. The words hit Victor like a physical blow. Can I see her? She's sedated right now. We need to keep her calm while her heart recovers. But yes, you can sit with her. Just keep it quiet. Victor nodded and moved to Elena's bedside like a man in a dream. Up close, she looked even more fragile. Her dark hair spread across the pillow, her lips slightly parted, her chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. He reached for her hand, so small and cold in his. I'm sorry, he whispered, though she couldn't hear him. Elena, I'm so sorry. He didn't know what he was apologizing for not answering her calls, for being with Selena, for all of it. Maybe for all of it. An hour passed, then 2. Victor sat in the uncomfortable plastic chair beside Elena's bed, holding her hand, watching the machines monitor her heartbeat. The rain had stopped, and through the window he could see the first gray light of dawn creeping across the sky. It was in that gray light that Elena's eyes finally opened. She looked at him for a long moment, and Victor saw something he'd never seen in his wife's eyes before. Not anger, not hurt, something far more terrifying. A complete absence of expectation. You didn't come, she whispered. 3 words, that's all it took. Victor's throat tightened. I'm here now. I called you. Her voice was so quiet he had to lean in to hear her. 3 times. I was dying, Victor, and I called you 3 times. I know. I'm sorry. I was with her. It wasn't a question. The certainty in Elena's voice made Victor's stomach drop. Elena, it's fine. She closed her eyes again, and a single tear slipped down her cheek. I understand now. You don't understand anything, Victor said, but the words sounded hollow even to him. I love you. I was scared out of my mind when I heard. You were scared, Elena repeated, her eyes still closed. I was dying. There's a difference. The machines beeped steadily in the silence that followed. Victor wanted to argue, to explain, to somehow make this right, but he didn't know how. For the first time in his adult life, Victor Romano, the man who controlled half the city's underground, who made politicians and police chiefs dance to his tune, had no idea what to say. I'm tired, Elena whispered. Please go. I'm not leaving you. Then stay. She turned her face away from him. But don't talk. I can't listen to you right now. So Victor stayed silent, watching his wife's profile in the growing dawn light, wondering when exactly everything had gone so wrong. What he didn't see was the woman standing in the corridor outside Elena's room, partially hidden behind a vending machine. Selina Vale had followed him to the hospital, driven by some instinct she couldn't name. Jealousy, maybe, or curiosity, or the simple need to see her competition, the wife Victor claimed meant nothing but couldn't seem to leave. Through the window in the door, Selina watched Victor hold Elena's hand with a tenderness she'd never seen him show her. She watched him lean forward and press his forehead against Elena's palm, his shoulders shaking slightly. She couldn't hear what he was saying, but she could see enough. This wasn't a man performing duty. This was a man terrified of losing something precious. Selina's hands clenched into fists at her sides. 6 months. She'd given Victor 6 months of her time, her passion, her carefully constructed plans. She'd positioned herself perfectly, cultivating relationships with his business associates, learning the architecture of his empire, making herself indispensable in ways Elena never had. And still, he looked at his wife like that. A nurse passed by, and Selina smoothed her expression into concern. Excuse me, she said softly. Elena Romano. Is she going to be okay? The nurse paused. Are you family? A friend, Selina lied smoothly. I just heard and came straight over. She's stable. The doctors are optimistic. The nurse smiled. She's lucky. Another hour and we might not have been able to save her. Another hour, Selina repeated quietly. Yes. Broken heart syndrome is serious, but if it's caught in time and treated properly, the heart usually recovers completely. The nurse checked her watch. I need to go, but you should know she'll need to avoid stress for the next few months. Anything that puts strain on her heart could trigger another episode. Of course, Selina said. Thank you. The nurse walked away and Selina stood alone in the corridor, her mind working through the implications. Elena would recover. The heart could be broken, but would heal, unless, of course, the stress continued, unless the things breaking her heart didn't stop. A slow smile curved Selina's lips. She pulled out her phone and sent a text. She's going to be fine. See you tomorrow night? In Elena's room, Victor's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, saw Selina's name, and immediately turned it off. But Elena had seen the notification too. Her eyes, when they met his, were completely empty. I think I'd like to rest now, she said quietly. Alone. Elena, please. Victor stood slowly, still holding her hand. I'll come back in a few hours. Bring you some things from home. Whatever you want, Elena said, and that was somehow worse than anger would have been. The complete indifference in her voice made Victor feel like he was losing her in a way he couldn't fight or control. He left the room feeling like a man walking away from a bomb he'd accidentally armed, not knowing when or how it would explode. In the corridor, he nearly walked straight into Selina. What are you doing here? Victor demanded, his voice low and dangerous. I was worried about you, Selina said, but her eyes flicked past him to Elena's room. Is she? She's fine. And you need to leave. Now. Victor, now, Selina. His tone left no room for argument. This isn't the place. Selina's jaw tightened, but she nodded. Fine. But we need to talk. Soon. Later, Victor said, and walked away before she could respond. He didn't see the look Selina gave Elena's room, the calculation in her eyes, the sharp twist of her mouth. He was already gone, heading to the parking garage, his mind churning through everything that had happened. What Victor didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that in her hospital bed, Elena Romano was wide awake, staring at the ceiling, her hand resting over her damaged heart. The broken heart syndrome diagnosis was accurate in more ways than the doctors realized. Something had broken in Elena tonight. Not just her heart muscle, but something deeper, some fundamental trust, some core belief about her life and her marriage and the man she'd given 7 years to. But unlike her heart muscle, which would heal in time, that deeper break would never mend. Instead, it would transform into something else entirely. Elena turned her head to look at the window. Dawn was fully arrived now, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. A new day. The first day of whatever came next. She thought about the 3 unanswered calls. The 30 minutes she'd lain on the kitchen floor, consciousness fading, believing she was going to die alone. The look on Victor's face when he'd finally arrived. Guilt and fear and something that might have been love, but came too late to matter. She thought about the text message she'd seen on his phone. The name Selena. The casual intimacy of "see you tomorrow night"? Slowly, methodically, Elena began to understand something that would have been impossible for the woman she was yesterday. The woman who'd married Victor Romano at 25, who'd believed in fairy tales and happy endings, who'd thought love was enough to build a life on. That woman had died on the kitchen floor tonight. The woman in this hospital bed was someone new, someone forged in betrayal and broken promises, someone who understood that power wasn't given, it was taken. Someone who would never, ever be helpless again. Elena closed her eyes, but she wasn't sleeping. She was thinking, planning, becoming. Outside her room, the hospital continued its relentless rhythm. Nurses checking vitals, machines beeping, lives being saved and lost in equal measure. In the parking garage, Victor sat in his Mercedes, his head in his hands, trying to figure out how to fix what he'd broken. Across town, Selena returned to the Riverside Hotel suite, poured herself a drink, and began making plans of her own. None of them understood yet that the real story, the one that would destroy them all, was just beginning. The broken heart would heal, but the woman it had broken was gone forever, and the ghost she became would haunt them both straight into hell. 3 days later, Elena was released from the hospital with strict instructions to avoid stress, take her medications, and return for weekly checkups. Victor brought her home to the penthouse in the middle of the afternoon, fussing over her like she was made of glass. "I've cleared my schedule for the next 2 weeks," he announced as he helped her onto the living room sofa, the same sofa where they'd watched movies on lazy Sunday mornings, back when their marriage still felt real. "Whatever you need, I'm here." Elena looked at him with those calm, empty eyes that made his skin crawl. "That's not necessary." "Yes, it is, Victor sat beside her, careful not to crowd her. "Elena, we need to talk about—" "No," she interrupted quietly. "We don't." "We do. About what happened. About us." "There's nothing to say, Victor." She smoothed her hand over the cashmere throw blanket he'd draped over her legs. "You were busy when I called. It happens." The casual dismissal was worse than any accusation. Victor searched her face for anger, for hurt, for anything that would give him something to fight against or apologize for. He found nothing. "I know you think—" he started. "I don't think anything," Elena said. "I'm tired. I'd like to rest now." She closed her eyes, ending the conversation as effectively as slamming a door. Victor sat there for a moment longer, feeling helpless in a way that was entirely foreign to him. He'd built his empire on reading people, on knowing what they wanted and how to use it, but his wife had become unreadable overnight. He stood and headed to his study, telling himself she just needed time, that this was the medications, or the trauma of the cardiac episode, or shock, that eventually she'd cry or yell or do something that would let him back in. What Victor didn't see was Elena's eyes opening the moment he left the room, the calmness falling away, replaced by something sharp and focused. She pulled her phone from the pocket of her robe, not the cracked phone from the night she collapsed, but a new one Victor had bought her. She opened a private browser and typed, "Private Investigator NYC Discrete Infidelity Cases." The search results filled her screen. Elena scrolled through them methodically, looking for one that seemed professional, expensive, and completely trustworthy. She found it in Barrett and Associates, a firm that specialized in sensitive personal matters for high-net-worth clients. She sent an email using a new account she'd created. "I need evidence of an affair. Money is no concern. Discretion is everything." The reply came back in less than an hour. "We can meet tomorrow. 2 p.m. The address below, come alone." Elena deleted the email thread and closed the browser. Then she picked up the television remote and turned on a cooking show, keeping the volume low. When Victor checked on her 20 minutes later, she appeared to be dozing peacefully. He had no idea his wife had just declared war. That evening, while Elena slept, or pretended to, Victor's phone rang. Selena. He stepped out onto the penthouse balcony to take the call, closing the glass door behind him. "I told you not to contact me for a while," he said without preamble. "It's been 3 days, Victor." Selena's voice was tight. "Are we really going to pretend this didn't happen? That you're just going to play house with her and I'm supposed to wait in the wings?" "My wife almost died." "Yes, I'm aware. I was at the hospital, remember?" There was an edge to Selena's words now. "The question is, how long are you going to use that as an excuse?" "An excuse?" Victor's temper flared. "She had a cardiac episode. She needs to recover without stress." "So what am I supposed to do? Just disappear until it's convenient for you again?" Victor pinched the bridge of his nose, feeling the beginnings of a headache. "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." Selena's laugh was bitter. "I see how this works now. I'm fine when you want an escape from your boring marriage, but the second your wife needs you to feel like a hero, I'm supposed to vanish. That's not fair." "No?" "Then tell me, Victor, when exactly were you planning to leave her? Or were you always going to string us both along?" "It's complicated." "It's really not," Selena said coldly. "Either you want to be with me or you don't. Either you're leaving her or you're not. Make a choice." Victor looked back through the glass door. He could see Elena on the sofa, the blanket pulled up to her chin, her face peaceful in sleep. Fragile. Broken. His responsibility. "I can't do this right now," he said finally. The silence on the other end of the line stretched long enough that he thought Selena had hung up. Then she spoke, and her voice was different, calm, controlled, dangerous. "Fine," she said. "Take your time, Victor. Play the devoted husband. But remember something. I know things about your business that Elena never will. I have access to accounts and deals and arrangements that would be unfortunate if they came to light. I've been very helpful to you these past 6 months. I'd hate for that to change." Victor's blood ran cold. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm reminding you of reality." Selena's tone was pleasant now, almost sweet. "We're partners, Victor, in more ways than one. Don't forget that." She hung up before he could respond. Victor stood on the balcony, the phone cold against his ear, his mind racing. Selena knew about the shipping routes through the harbor, the cash businesses they laundered money through, the arrangement with the city councilman. She'd inserted herself into his operations slowly, gradually, making herself useful in ways he'd been too distracted to question. And now she was threatening to expose it all if he didn't choose her. For the first time, Victor wondered if sleeping with Selena Vale had been the biggest mistake of his life. Behind him, through the glass, Elena's eyes opened. She could see Victor's reflection in the window, could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he gripped the balcony railing. She couldn't hear what he was saying, but she didn't need to. She already knew. Elena closed her eyes again and let a small, cold smile curve her lips. Let them think she was the fragile one. Let them think she was breaking. They had no idea what was really breaking was their world, and she was the one holding the hammer. The office of Barrett and Associates sat on the 14th floor of an unremarkable building in Midtown, the kind of place that blended into the city's architecture so completely you could walk past it 100 times and never notice, which was exactly the point. Elena arrived at 1:55, dressed in a simple black dress and oversized sunglasses that hid most of her face. The receptionist, a severe woman in her 50s with steel gray hair, barely looked up from her computer. "Name?" "Mrs. Chen," Elena said, using the surname of the doctor who'd saved her life. It felt appropriate somehow. "Third door on the left. Mr. Barrett is expecting you." The hallway was quiet, carpeted in industrial gray that muffled her footsteps. Elena found the door and knocked once. "Come in." James Barrett was younger than she'd expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and the kind of neat appearance that suggested military background. His office was sparse, functional, containing nothing personal except a single photograph of what might have been his daughter on the desk. "Mrs. Chen," he said, not rising, "please sit." Elena took the chair across from him, keeping her sunglasses on. Barrett studied her for a moment, then nodded as if confirming something to himself. You're not Mrs. Chen. Does it matter? No. He pulled a form from his desk drawer. What matters is whether you can afford my retainer, $50,000. Non-refundable. That buys you 1 month of surveillance, detailed reporting, photographic and video evidence if it exists, and complete discretion. Additional months are $30,000 each. Elena opened her purse, a Hermes bag Victor had given her for their 5th anniversary, and withdrew a plain white envelope. She set it on the desk between them. Barrett opened it, counted the bills inside with practiced efficiency, and nodded. 1 month. Tell me what you need. My husband is having an affair. The words came out easier than Elena expected. Maybe because saying them out loud made them real, and making them real meant she could finally do something about them. I need to know everything. Where they meet, how often, what they talk about. If there's anyone else. I need documentation of all of it. Does he know you suspect? No? Elena allowed herself a small smile. He thinks I'm too fragile to notice. I had a cardiac episode 6 days ago. He's been very attentive since then. Something flickered in Barrett's expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition. I'll need his name, his usual locations, any details about the woman if you have them. Elena recited the information calmly, clinically, as if she were describing a stranger's life. Victor's office address. The restaurants he frequented. His gym. The fact that his mistress had green eyes and an accent and had texted him the night Elena almost died. Her name is Selena, Elena finished. I don't know her last name, but she's involved in his business somehow. She knows things she shouldn't. Barrett's pen paused on the notepad. What kind of business? The kind you don't ask questions about if you want to stay healthy. Elena met his eyes. Is that a problem? It doubles my rate. Elena opened her purse again and withdrew a second envelope. Will this cover it? Barrett counted it. Another 50,000, and his eyebrows rose fractionally. You came prepared. I came serious, Mr. Barrett. My husband built an empire on secrets and lies. I need you to expose them, all of them. Can you do that? I can. Barrett stood and extended his hand. I'll have a preliminary report for you in 1 week. We'll communicate through encrypted email only. The address is on this card. Memorize it and destroy the card. Elena took the business card, glanced at it once, and slipped it into her coat pocket. One more thing. Yes? If anyone asks, and they might, you've never heard of me. You've never seen me. This meeting never happened. Mrs. Chen, Barrett said with the ghost of a smile, I don't know what you're talking about. Elena left the office feeling lighter than she had in days. The medication kept her heart steady, but this, taking action, refusing to be a victim, did something the pills couldn't. It gave her purpose. By the time she returned to the penthouse, Victor was in his study on a conference call, his voice carrying through the closed door. Elena moved through the apartment silently, her footsteps making no sound on the marble floors. She'd lived here for 7 years, but suddenly it felt like a stranger's home. Every piece of furniture Victor had chosen, every painting he'd bought, even the dishes in the kitchen were his taste, not hers. She'd disappeared into his life so completely she couldn't remember what her own preferences were anymore. That was going to change. Elena went to the bedroom and opened Victor's closet. His suits hung in perfect rows, organized by color and season. His shoes lined up beneath them like soldiers. She ran her hand along the fabric of a charcoal Tom Ford jacket, then reached into the inside pocket. Nothing. She tried the next jacket, the next. On the 5th one, a navy brioni he'd worn to a fundraiser 2 months ago, her fingers found something. A receipt from the Riverside Hotel. Presidential suite. Charged to a credit card she didn't recognize. Elena photographed it with her phone and put it back exactly as she'd found it. She moved to his dresser next, methodically searching through socks and ties and cufflinks. In the back of his sock drawer, beneath the cashmere argyles, she found a second phone. A burner, untraceable, the kind Victor used for business he didn't want recorded. Her hands trembled slightly as she turned it on. It was password protected, but Elena knew Victor. She tried his mother's birthday, the only person he'd ever truly loved before Elena came along. The phone unlocked. The messages loaded slowly, and with each one, Elena felt something inside her grow colder and sharper. Selena, miss you already? Tonight was perfect. Victor, you're dangerous. Selena, you love it. When can I see you again? Victor. Soon. I need to handle some things first. Selena. Handle me instead. The messages went back 6 months, just as Elena had suspected, but it was the most recent ones, the ones from the last week, that made her breath catch. Selena. How's the devoted husband act going? Victor. She's recovering. Doctor says she needs to avoid stress. Selena. So convenient. And how long are you going to use her health as an excuse to avoid me? Victor. It's not an excuse. She almost died. Selena. But she didn't. So now what? You play nursemaid while I wait in the wings? I don't think so, Victor. We had a deal. Victor. We didn't have a deal. We had an arrangement. Selena. Same thing. And I kept my end. I've been very helpful with your business interests. I'd hate to become less helpful. Victor. Are you threatening me? Selena. I'm reminding you of reality. Choose wisely. Elena read the exchange 3 times, memorizing every word. Then she scrolled back further, looking for anything that mentioned business. She found it in a message from 4 months ago. Selena. The shipment cleared customs. I told you my contact at the port would come through. Victor. You're good at this. Selena. I'm good at a lot of things. You're just starting to notice. So Selena wasn't just his mistress, she was part of his operation. She had leverage, connections, knowledge that could destroy him if she chose to use it. And from the recent messages, it was clear she was willing to do exactly that if Victor didn't leave Elena. Elena photographed every relevant message, then turned the phone off and placed it back in the sock drawer exactly as she'd found it. Her heart was beating fast, too fast, and she made herself breathe slowly, counting to 4 on the inhale, holding for 4, exhaling for 4. The technique the cardiologist had taught her to manage stress. But this wasn't stress. This was clarity. She returned to the living room just as Victor emerged from his study. He looked tired, she noticed, older than his 38 years with lines of tension around his mouth. You're up, he said, concern immediately flooding his expression. Should you be walking around so much? I'm fine, Victor. I just needed to move. Elena settled onto the sofa, tucking her legs beneath her. How was your call? Fine. Business. He crossed to the bar and poured himself 2 fingers of scotch, then seemed to think better of it and put the glass down. I should spend time with you instead. You don't have to babysit me. I'm not babysitting. I want to be here. He sat beside her, maintaining a careful distance. I've been thinking, maybe we should go away for a while. Once you're cleared by the doctors, take a trip somewhere. Just us. Where would we go? Elena asked, genuinely curious what he would say. I don't know. Wherever you want. The Amalfi Coast? You always talked about wanting to see Italy. That was 7 years ago, Victor, on our honeymoon, when we couldn't afford it. We can afford it now. He reached for her hand and Elena let him take it. His palm was warm, familiar. Once upon a time, his touch had made her feel safe. I want to give you everything, Elena. I know I've been distracted lately. I know I haven't been the husband you deserve, but I'm here now. Let me make it up to you. Elena looked at him, really looked at him, and wondered if he believed his own lies. If he'd convinced himself that a vacation could erase 6 months of betrayal, that taking her to Italy would somehow make up for letting her die alone on their kitchen floor. That sounds nice, she said softly. When I'm better? Relief flooded Victor's face. When you're better? We'll plan it together? He leaned in to kiss her forehead, and Elena closed her eyes, letting him believe she was the same woman she'd been before, the woman who'd loved him unconditionally, the woman who'd asked for nothing and received less. That woman was dead. But Victor didn't need to know that yet. After he returned to his study, Elena sat alone in the gathering darkness, her phone in her hand. She pulled up the photographs she'd taken, the hotel receipt, the text messages, the evidence of everything Victor thought he'd hidden so well. Then she opened the encrypted email address Barrett had given her and began typing. I have additional information. My husband uses a second phone for his affair and business communications. I've documented the messages. The woman's full name is Selena Vale. I found it in his contacts. She has connections to his shipping operations and leverage she's threatening to use. I need you to dig deeper, find out everything about her, where she came from, what she wants, what she's capable of. She attached the photographs and hit send. The response came back within minutes. Understood. I'll prioritize this. Be careful, Mrs. Chen. If she has the kind of leverage you're describing, she's dangerous. Elena smiled at the screen. So am I, she typed back. You just don't know it yet. The days that followed settled into a strange routine. Victor played the attentive husband, bringing Elena breakfast in bed, sitting with her during the afternoon, canceling meetings to be present. He was trying so hard to be good that Elena almost felt sorry for him. Almost. She played her role perfectly. The recovering wife, grateful for his attention, slowly regaining her strength. She took her medications on schedule. She attended her cardiology appointments. She smiled when Victor suggested watching movies together or ordering dinner from her favorite restaurant. And every night, while Victor slept beside her, Elena slipped out of bed and checked the encrypted email for updates from Barrett. The first report came on day 5. Selena Vale, 29 years old, originally from Montreal, moved to New York 3 years ago. Works as a consultant for various import/export companies, or at least that's what her tax returns say. Her lifestyle doesn't match her declared income. She drives a Mercedes, lives in a luxury apartment in Tribeca, wears designer clothes. Someone's funding her, and I'm guessing it's not just your husband. I'm digging into her financial records now. More to follow. Elena read the message twice, then deleted it and cleared the browser history before sliding back into bed. Beside her, Victor stirred slightly but didn't wake. In sleep, he looked almost innocent, almost like the man she'd married. But Elena knew better now. Innocence was a luxury neither of them could afford anymore. The second report came 3 days later, and this one made Elena sit up straight in the darkness of the study, her heart pounding against her ribs. Selena Vale has connections to the Marchetti family, specifically to Carlo Marchetti, who runs operations on the West Side. She's been laundering money through a consulting firm she set up 2 years ago. The firm provides legitimate-looking invoices for services never rendered, and the payments flow through to offshore accounts. Your husband's businesses have paid her firm over $2 million in the last 18 months. But here's the interesting part. She's also receiving payments from the Marchettis. She's playing both sides, using her relationship with your husband to access his operations while feeding information back to his competitors. She's not just his mistress, she's a plant. Elena read the words 3 times, her mind racing. Selena wasn't just sleeping with Victor for money or love, or even leverage. She was working for his enemies, using the affair to get close to him, to learn his secrets, to position herself at the heart of his empire so she could tear it apart from the inside. And Victor had no idea. Elena's fingers flew across the keyboard. Can you prove this? I need documentation. Financial records, communication between her and the Marchettis, anything that shows she's deliberately infiltrating his operation. Barrett's response came within the hour. I can get it, but it's going to take time and cost more. We're talking about hacking into encrypted communications and offshore financial databases. This is federal crime territory. Are you sure you want me to proceed? Elena didn't hesitate. Proceed. Whatever it costs. I need everything. Understood. Give me 2 weeks. Elena cleared the browser and sat in the darkness, her thoughts whirling. This changed everything. Selena wasn't just a woman who'd stolen her husband. She was a threat to Victor's entire operation. If the Marchettis had planted her deliberately, they were playing a long game, getting close to Victor, learning his vulnerabilities, positioning themselves to strike. And when they did strike, Victor would be destroyed. His businesses seized, his assets frozen, possibly even criminal charges if they could tie him directly to the illegal operations. The old Elena, the one who'd died on the kitchen floor, would have warned him, would have shown him the evidence and let him handle it, would have protected him because that's what wives did. But this Elena understood something the old one never had. Victor's destruction was her opportunity. If Selena was working for the Marchettis, and if Elena could prove it, she wouldn't just expose the affair, she'd expose the entire conspiracy. And in the chaos that followed, the investigations, the betrayals, the collapse of everything Victor had built, Elena could position herself to take everything that mattered. Not revenge, strategy. The thought should have frightened her. A month ago, it would have. But the woman sitting in the darkness with her laptop felt nothing but cold, calculating satisfaction. 2 weeks later, Barrett delivered. The email came at 3 a.m. with an encrypted attachment that took 5 minutes to download. When Elena opened it, she found herself looking at a comprehensive dossier that would have made federal prosecutors weep with joy. Financial transactions showing money flowing from Marchetti-controlled accounts to Selena's consulting firm. Encrypted messages between Selena and Carlo Marchetti discussing Victor's shipping routes and warehouse locations. Photographs of Selena meeting with Marchetti associates in restaurants and hotel bars. A paper trail showing she'd deliberately positioned herself at the charity gala where she'd first met Victor, knowing he'd be there, knowing Elena would be there, setting the trap with precision. The affair hadn't been spontaneous. It had been calculated from the first moment, and woven through all of it were the text messages between Selena and Victor, the ones Elena had photographed from his burner phone, now contextualized by what they revealed. Every time Selena had asked about his business, she'd been gathering intelligence. Every suggestion she'd made about operations had been designed to expose vulnerabilities. Every moment of their affair had been part of a larger plan to destroy him. Elena sat back in her chair, her mind working through the implications. She could take this to Victor right now. Show him what Barrett had uncovered. Let him handle it the way he handled all threats, with violence and power and the full force of his criminal empire. The Marchettis would retaliate. Selena would disappear or end up dead, and Victor would owe Elena his life, his business, everything. He'd be grateful, devoted. Exipollinate the husband he'd been pretending to be these last few weeks. And she'd be exactly where she was before, invisible, powerless, living in the shadow of his empire. No. Elena closed the laptop and sat in the darkness, a new plan forming. If Selena was a weapon pointed at Victor, then Elena wouldn't disarm her. She'd redirect her, use the very conspiracy designed to destroy her husband to destroy them both. But to do that, she'd need to be patient, careful, smarter than either of them realized she could be. The next morning, Victor found Elena in the kitchen making coffee, her first time out of bed before 9 since the cardiac episode. "You're up early," he said, pleasure evident in his voice. "Feeling better?" "Much better." Elena smiled at him, and it didn't even feel like a lie anymore. She did feel better, stronger, more alive than she had in years. "I think I'm ready to start getting back to normal." "That's wonderful." Victor crossed to her and kissed her cheek. "I knew you'd recover. You're stronger than you think." "Yes," Elena agreed quietly. "I am." She watched him pour his coffee, watched him check his phone with the unconscious habit of a man with too many secrets. She wondered if Selena had texted him this morning, if they'd made plans to meet, if he was already counting the hours until he could slip away from his recovering wife and back into the arms of the woman who was going to destroy him. Let him go, Elena thought. Let him believe everything was fine. Let them both believe she was just the fragile, forgiving wife who'd survived her broken heart and learned to live with her husband's betrayal. They'd learn the truth soon enough. Victor's phone buzzed and he glanced at it, his expression tightening fractionally. "Work?" Elena asked innocently. "Always." He set the phone down. "Nothing that can't wait." But Elena had seen his face, had seen the flash of something that might have been guilt or anxiety or fear. Selena was pushing him. The messages Barrett had uncovered made that clear. She wanted Victor to leave Elena, and she was running out of patience. Good. Impatient people made mistakes. "I was thinking," Elena said carefully, "maybe I should start going out again. Just short walks at first. The doctor said light exercise would help." Victor's face lit up. "That's a great idea. I can come with you." "No, it's fine. I know you're busy." Elena touched his arm gently. "I'll just go to the park. Maybe sit by the fountain. Nothing strenuous." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." She smiled. "You've been wonderful these past few weeks, Victor, but I can't expect you to put your whole life on hold for me. I need to start being independent again." She could see him struggling between relief and guilt. Relief that he'd have more freedom, guilt that he felt relieved. Guilt won, as she knew it would. "Only if you promise to call me if you feel even slightly off," he said. "The cardiologist said any chest pain, any dizziness." "I promise." Elena kissed his cheek. "I'll be careful." That afternoon, while Victor was at a meeting he couldn't cancel, Elena left the penthouse for the first time since coming home from the hospital. But she didn't go to the park. She went to a coffee shop 3 blocks from Selena Vale's Tribeca apartment and waited. Barrett's surveillance had documented Selena's routine thoroughly. Every Tuesday at 2:30, she went to a yoga class 6 blocks south. She'd passed this coffee shop on her way. Elena ordered green tea and sat by the window, her phone in her hand, Barrett's dossier open on the screen. She studied Selena's face in the surveillance photos. Beautiful, calculating, dangerous. The woman who'd seduced her husband. The woman who was working to destroy him. the woman who had no idea Elena existed as anything more than an obstacle. At exactly 2:28, Selena walked past the window. She was even more striking in person than in the photographs. Tall and elegant in expensive workout clothes, her dark hair pulled back, designer sunglasses hiding her eyes. She moved with the confidence of someone who'd never been denied anything she wanted. Elena watched her disappear down the street, feeling nothing but cold assessment. No jealousy, no rage, just the clinical evaluation of an opponent. The affair had never been about Selena being better than Elena. It had been about Selena being useful. And now that Elena understood what kind of useful Selena really was, she could begin to plan. She pulled out her phone and sent a message to Barrett. I need one more thing. I need to know when and where they're meeting. I need to know their schedule. Can you do that? Already tracking it. They meet every Wednesday and Friday at the Riverside Hotel. Presidential suite. He usually arrives at 7 p.m. She gets there around 7:30. Stays until midnight. Elena felt something twist in her chest. Not pain exactly, but the ghost of it. Tomorrow was Wednesday. Thank you, she typed. That's everything I need. What are you planning, Mrs. Chen? Elena stared at the message for a long moment. What was she planning? Revenge? Justice? Survival? All of it. None of it. Something entirely new. I'm planning to win, she typed back and closed her phone. That night, she lay beside Victor in their bed and listened to him breathe. Tomorrow he'd tell her he had a late meeting. Tomorrow he'd shower and put on cologne and leave her alone in their penthouse while he drove across town to sleep with a woman who was using him to destroy everything he'd built. And tomorrow, Elena would begin destroying them both. But not yet. Not until she had everything in place. Not until every piece was positioned exactly where it needed to be. Patience, she reminded herself. The heart attack had taught her patience. Had taught her that sometimes the only way to survive was to appear to be dying. To let your enemies think you were broken while you gathered strength. Victor stirred beside her, his arm draping across her waist in sleep. Once upon a time, that gesture had made her feel loved, protected, chosen. Now it just felt like another lie. Elena closed her eyes and waited for morning. Wednesday arrived with unseasonable warmth, the kind of false spring that made people forget winter was still waiting. Elena woke before Victor, slipping out of bed while the sky was still gray with pre-dawn light. She made coffee in the silent kitchen and stood by the window, watching the city wake below her. Today, she thought, today everything changes. Victor emerged from the bedroom at 7, already dressed in one of his perfectly tailored suits. He moved through his morning routine with the efficiency of someone whose life ran on schedules and calculations. Elena watched him from the living room, noting the extra care he took with his appearance. The cologne, the Italian leather shoes instead of his usual ones, the way he checked his phone 3 times in 5 minutes. Big day? She asked. Victor looked up, startled, as if he'd forgotten she was there. Just the usual chaos. I have meetings until late. Probably won't be home until midnight. Midnight, Elena repeated softly. That's a long day. Construction bid fell through on the waterfront project. I need to smooth things over with the contractors. The lie came so easily to him, so practiced. I'm sorry. I know I promised we'd have dinner together. It's fine, Victor. I understand. Elena crossed to him and straightened his tie, her fingers gentle against the silk. Business comes first. He caught her hand and pressed it to his lips. You come first, always. The irony of the statement, spoken just hours before he'd drive across town to his mistress, should have hurt. Instead, Elena felt nothing but cold clarity. I know, she said, and kissed his cheek. Be safe. After Victor left, Elena moved with purpose. She dressed carefully, simple black pants, a cashmere sweater, comfortable shoes. Nothing memorable, nothing that would stand out. She pulled her hair back and put on minimal makeup. The goal was to disappear into the city's crowds, to become just another face among millions. At 11, she took a cab to a location 3 blocks from the Riverside Hotel and waited in a small cafe with a clear view of the entrance. Barrett had provided her with more than just information. He'd given her access to the hotel's security schedule, the shift changes, the blind spots in their camera coverage. He'd told her which entrances to avoid and which ones would let her pass unnoticed. Are you planning to confront them? He'd asked in their last encrypted exchange. No, Elena had replied. I'm planning to watch. Because knowledge was power, and Elena was done being powerless. The hours crawled by. Elena nursed 3 cups of tea and a sandwich she barely touched, her eyes never leaving the hotel entrance. At 6:45, her phone buzzed with a message from Barrett's surveillance team. Subject 1 approaching from the east. ETA 3 minutes. Elena's pulse quickened. She set down her cup and focused on the street. Victor's Mercedes pulled up to the hotel entrance at exactly 7 o'clock. He emerged from the car, handed his keys to the valet, and disappeared through the revolving doors. He moved with the confidence of someone who'd done this dozens of times, someone who knew exactly where he was going and what would be waiting for him. Elena forced herself to breathe slowly, to stay calm, to remember that rage was useless without strategy. At 7:28, a second message arrived. Subject 2 approaching from the south. ETA 2 minutes. Selena arrived in a taxi, stepping onto the sidewalk in a dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Emerald green, cut to emphasize every curve, paired with heels that added 3 inches to her already considerable height. She walked into the hotel like she owned it, and maybe, in a way, she did. This was her stage, her performance, the role she'd been playing for 6 months. Elena waited another 10 minutes, then paid her bill, and crossed the street. The Riverside Hotel lobby was all marble and gold, the kind of ostentatious luxury that separated the wealthy from everyone else. Elena kept her head down and moved toward the elevators with the purposeful stride of someone who belonged. The desk clerk didn't even glance at her. Barrett had provided her with a key card, don't ask how he'd obtained it, that gave her access to the service elevator. She rode it to the 14th floor, emerged into a quiet hallway, and counted doors until she found the one she needed. Not the presidential suite. The room directly across from it. The key card worked. Elena slipped inside and locked the door behind her, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. The room was small, clean, unremarkable, but the view from the peephole showed her exactly what she needed to see, the door to the presidential suite. She settled into the chair beside the door and waited. What she was doing was insane, dangerous. If Victor found her here, if anyone saw her, the carefully constructed facade she'd been maintaining would shatter. But Elena had moved beyond fear, somewhere between the hospital bed and this moment. Fear was for people who had something left to lose. At 7:53, she heard it. Laughter, muffled but unmistakable, coming from across the hall. A woman's voice, Selena's, followed by Victor's lower rumble. The sound of the suite door opening and closing. Then silence. Elena closed her eyes and let herself feel it. Not the pain, she'd moved past pain, but the final severing of whatever connection had once existed between her and the man she'd married. This was the moment the marriage truly ended. Not when he'd first kissed Selena, or when he'd ignored Elena's calls while she was dying, but right now. This moment of absolute clarity. She stayed in that room for 3 hours, listening to the silence of the hallway, imagining what was happening 20 feet away. At 11:15, her phone buzzed with a message from Barrett. Subject 1's driver just arrived. He'll be leaving soon. You should go. Elena stood, her legs stiff from sitting motionless. She took one last look through the peephole at the presidential suite door, memorizing this moment, this feeling. Then she slipped out of the room and took the service elevator back down to the lobby. She was 3 blocks away when she saw Victor's Mercedes pull out of the hotel parking garage and disappear into the night traffic. Heading home. Heading back to her. Elena caught a cab and arrived at the penthouse 15 minutes before Victor. She changed into pajamas, washed her face, and was curled up on the sofa with a book when she heard his key in the lock. You're still up, he said, surprise evident in his voice. Couldn't sleep. Elena set down her book and studied him. He looked exactly as he had when he'd left that morning. Composed. Collected. No trace of guilt or dishonesty except in the slight redness around his collar, where Selena's lipstick had been hastily wiped away. How were your meetings? She asked. Exhausting, but productive. Victor loosened his tie and poured himself a scotch. How was your day? Quiet. I took a walk, read, thought about things. What kind of things? Elena smiled. Our future, what comes next? Something flickered in Victor's expression. Unease, maybe, or the faintest recognition that his wife was different somehow. But he shook it off and sat beside her, scotch in hand. I've been thinking about that too, he said. About Italy. About taking that trip once you're fully recovered. We could leave in a few weeks. Stay as long as you want. That sounds lovely, Elena said, and meant it. Because by the time a few weeks passed, Victor wouldn't be taking any trips. He'd be too busy trying to salvage what was left of his empire. They sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, and Elena wondered if this was what their marriage had always been. Two people occupying the same space, speaking the same words, but living in completely different realities. "I love you," Victor said suddenly, as if the words could somehow make it true. Elena looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a man desperately trying to convince himself he was someone he wasn't. A man who wanted to be good but lacked the courage to actually be good. A man who thought he could have everything and pay for nothing. "I know," she said, because what else was there to say? Victor finished his scotch and went to bed. Elena stayed on the sofa, her book forgotten, her mind already moving to the next phase of her plan. The following morning, she sent an encrypted email to Barrett. "I need you to do something for me. I need you to make sure the Marchettis know that Selena is compromised, that her cover is at risk. Make it look like information leaked from someone in Victor's organization. Can you do that?" The response came back within an hour. "I can, but once I do this, things are going to escalate quickly. The Marchettis will either pull her out or push the timeline up on whatever they're planning. Either way, it's going to get messy. Are you sure?" Elena's fingers hovered over the keyboard. This was the point of no return. Once she set this in motion, she couldn't stop it. The conspiracy would collapse, taking Victor and Selena with it, and Elena would be standing in the ruins, ready to build something new. "I'm sure," she typed. "Do it." 3 days later, everything began to unravel. It started with a phone call Victor took in his study, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. Elena heard him through the closed door, pacing like a caged animal. "I don't care what it takes. Find out who leaked it. Someone in my organization is talking to the Marchettis, and I want to know who." Elena continued making dinner as if she hadn't heard, but her pulse was racing. It was working. Barrett had planted the information exactly as she'd asked, making it look like someone in Victor's inner circle had discovered Selena's connection to the Marchettis and reported it. Victor would be looking for a traitor in his own ranks, never suspecting his recovering wife. When he emerged from the study 20 minutes later, his face was ashen. "Is everything okay?" Elena asked. "Business problems, nothing you need to worry about." But his hands were shaking slightly as he poured himself a drink. "I might need to go out of town for a few days. Handle some things personally." "Of course." "When?" "Tomorrow, probably. I'll know more tonight." He drained the scotch in one swallow. "I'm sorry. I know the timing isn't ideal." "Victor, I'm fine. I've been fine for weeks now." Elena touched his arm gently. "Do what you need to do. I'll be here when you get back." The gratitude in his eyes was almost painful to see. He still thought she was his safe harbor, his constant, the one thing in his chaotic world that would never betray him. He had no idea the betrayal was already complete. That night, after Victor finally fell into a restless sleep, Elena received another message from Barrett. "The Marchettis are pulling Selena out. They're going to cut their losses and disappear her before your husband figures out what she really is. But there's a problem. She doesn't want to go. She's refusing to leave. Says she has too much invested in Victor to walk away now." Elena stared at the message, her mind racing. Selena was refusing orders from the Marchettis. That meant she'd gone rogue, that she was operating on her own now, with her own agenda. That made her even more dangerous. "What is she planning?" Elena typed back. "Not sure yet. But my surveillance team says she's been moving money around, liquidating assets, setting up new accounts. Whatever she's planning, she's getting ready to run. And I don't think she's planning to run alone." Understanding crashed over Elena like a wave. Selena wasn't just going to disappear, she was going to take Victor with her. Or rather, she was going to take everything Victor had and leave him with nothing. The affair had started as a Marchetti operation, but somewhere along the way, Selena had seen an opportunity for herself. She'd used the Marchetti's resources to get close to Victor, to learn his operation, to position herself at the center of his empire, and now she was going to rob him blind and vanish before either the Marchettis or Victor could stop her. It was actually brilliant, ruthless, amoral, and utterly brilliant. Elena almost admired it. "How long do we have?" she asked Barrett. "Maybe a week. 2 at most. She's moving fast." "Then so are we," Elena replied. "I need you to document everything she's doing. Every account she opens, every asset she moves, every plan she makes. And I need something else. I need you to find out where she's planning to run to." "Why?" "Because I'm going to make sure she doesn't get there." Elena closed her laptop and sat in the darkness, her thoughts crystallizing into a plan that was equal parts audacious and terrifying. She'd spent weeks gathering information, documenting the affair, exposing the conspiracy. But information alone wouldn't be enough. She needed leverage, she needed power, and most of all, she needed to ensure that when this all came crashing down, she was the only one left standing. The next morning, Victor left for the airport before dawn. He kissed Elena goodbye with a distraction that told her his mind was already elsewhere, already focused on the crisis threatening his empire. "I'll call you when I land," he promised. "Be safe," Elena said, and watched him disappear into the elevator. The moment he was gone, she made a phone call to a number she'd memorized but never called. "Marchetti residence," a gravelly voice answered. "I need to speak with Carlo Marchetti," Elena said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Tell him it's about Selina Vale." There was a long pause. "Who is this?" "Someone who can give him what he wants, but I need to speak with him directly." Another pause, longer this time. Then, "Hold." Elena waited, counting her heartbeats, wondering if she'd just made a fatal mistake. Reaching out to the Marchettis was insane. Suicidal. If Victor ever found out, if anyone found out, she'd be putting herself in unimaginable danger. But danger was relative. And Elena had already died once on her kitchen floor. Everything since then was borrowed time. "This is Carlo Marchetti." The voice was cultured, urbane, nothing like the Hollywood gangster Elena had imagined. "You have exactly 1 minute to tell me why I shouldn't hang up." "Selina Vale has been stealing from you," Elena said. "The accounts she set up to funnel money from my husband's operations? She's been skimming 20% off the top and moving it into her own offshore holdings. She's accumulated over $3 million of your money, and she's planning to disappear with it in the next week." Silence on the other end of the line, then, "And you know this how?" "Because I've been watching her, documenting her, gathering evidence of everything she's done." Elena's voice was calm, measured. "I know about the plan to use her to infiltrate my husband's organization. I know she was supposed to feed you information that would let you take over his territories. I know she's gone rogue and is planning to rob you both. And I can prove all of it." "Why would you tell me this?" Marchetti's tone was sharp now, interested. "Your husband is the one she's stealing from. Why not warn him?" "Because my husband is going to get exactly what he deserves," Elena said quietly. "But so is Selina. And so are you, Mr. Marchetti. The question is whether you want to minimize your losses or let a woman who's already betrayed you once walk away with millions of your money." Another pause. Elena could almost hear Marchetti thinking, calculating, weighing her words against what he already knew. "What do you want?" he asked finally. "A meeting. 1 hour. Somewhere public. You bring one person, I bring no one. We discuss terms." "Terms for what?" "For me giving you everything I have on Selina. Bank accounts, transaction records, travel plans, communication logs. Everything you need to stop her before she disappears. And in exchange, you leave my husband alone." Elena's voice was steel now. "Whatever your plans were for his operations, you abandon them. You disappear from his life. And from mine." Marchetti laughed, a sound like gravel shifting. "You want me to give up a multi-million-dollar operation because you're handing me evidence against one rogue operative?" "No," Elena corrected. "I want you to give up an operation that's already compromised because you sent someone incompetent to run it. Selina has cost you time, money, and credibility. She's stolen from you. She's ignored your orders. She's made you look weak in front of every organization in the city that's watching to see if the Marchettis still have teeth." She paused. "I'm offering you a way to save face, to cut your losses, to punish the person who actually betrayed you instead of starting a war with my husband that will cost you more than you'll ever gain." The silence stretched so long Elena thought he'd hung up. Then, "Central Park. The Bethesda Fountain. 2 hours. Come alone." The line went dead. Elena set down her phone, her hands trembling now that the conversation was over. She'd just negotiated with a crime boss, offered evidence against one criminal to protect another, stepped into a world of violence and power that she'd always existed on the periphery of but never truly entered. There was no going back from this. But then again, there'd been no going back from the moment she'd woken up in that hospital bed and whispered, "You didn't come." Elena dressed carefully for the meeting. Elegant but not ostentatious. Expensive but not flashy. She wanted to look like someone who belonged in Carlo Marchetti's world without appearing to be trying too hard. She pulled her hair back, put on minimal jewelry, and slipped Barrett's entire dossier into a leather portfolio. The cab ride to Central Park felt surreal. The city moved around her with its usual indifference. Millions of people living their ordinary lives while Elena rode toward a meeting that could get her killed. She arrived at Bethesda Fountain 15 minutes early and took a position on a nearby bench where she could see anyone approaching. The November air was cold enough that most tourists had abandoned the park, leaving only joggers and the occasional photographer. At exactly 2 o'clock, Carlo Marchetti appeared. He was younger than Elena expected, maybe 50, with silver at his temples and the kind of tailored elegance that came from money so old it didn't need to announce itself. He walked with one other man, a massive bodyguard who looked like he could break Elena in half without effort, but kept several paces back as Marchetti approached her bench. "Mrs. Romano," he said, and it wasn't a question. "Mr. Marchetti." Elena stood, the portfolio in her hands. "Thank you for meeting me. Let's walk." It wasn't a suggestion. They moved along the path around the fountain, the bodyguard trailing at a discreet distance. For a few minutes, neither spoke. Then Marchetti said, "You're either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid." "Neither," Elena replied. "I'm practical. Selina Vale is a problem for both of us. I'm offering a solution. Show me what you have." Elena opened the portfolio and handed him a single sheet, a summary of Selina's financial movements over the past 6 months. Enough to prove she had real information, but not enough to give away everything. Marchetti studied it for a long moment, his face impassive. "This shows she's been skimming. It doesn't prove she's planning to run." "The full dossier does," as Elena met his eyes. "But I'm not giving you that until we have an agreement." "You want me to walk away from your husband's operations based on a promise?" "No, I want you to walk away based on cold calculation." Elena's voice was calm, certain. "You invested 6 months and substantial resources into placing Selina. That investment is now worthless because she betrayed you. Starting a war with Victor would cost you more time, more money, more risk. And for what? Territories you can acquire a dozen other ways without the mess of taking down someone who's already on alert? He'll know someone was targeting him. Let him know. Let him spend the next year looking over his shoulder, wondering who else in his organization might be a plant. Let him tear his empire apart from the inside trying to find ghosts." Elena smiled slightly. "Sometimes the fear of an attack is more damaging than the attack itself." Marchetti stopped walking and turned to face her fully. "You're not what I expected." "No one ever is," Elena said. "Do we have a deal?" "Let me see the rest first." Elena handed him the full portfolio. Marchetti flipped through it methodically, his expression growing colder with each page. Bank statements showing millions diverted from Marchetti accounts. Encrypted messages between Selina and offshore banking representatives. Flight manifests showing she'd already purchased tickets to 3 different countries under false names. Communication logs proving she'd been ignoring Marchetti's orders for weeks. It was comprehensive, damning, irrefutable. When he finished, Marchetti looked at Elena with something that might have been respect. "How did you get all this?" "I hired someone very good at finding things people want hidden." "And you're giving it to me because?" "Because Selina Vale destroyed my marriage. Because she's been using my husband to steal from you. Because she deserves to lose everything. And I want to be the one who makes it happen." Elena's voice was quiet but fierce. "And because you and I both know that sometimes the enemy of my enemy is exactly the ally I need." Marchetti handed the portfolio back. "Keep it. I've seen enough." He studied her for another moment. "You could have taken this to the FBI, turned it into a federal case, destroyed both Selina and your husband." "I could have," Elena agreed. "But that would have destroyed me too. This way, I get justice without prison. You get your money back and save face. And Selina gets exactly what she deserves." "What about your husband?" "He'll survive. He always does." Elena's smile was cold. "But he'll know he was targeted. He'll know his organization was compromised. He'll know he can't trust anyone. That's punishment enough." Marchetti was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded once, sharp and decisive. "We have a deal. I'll handle Selina. And your husband's operations are no longer of interest to me." "How will you handle her?" "That's not your concern." Marchetti's tone made it clear the conversation was over. "But I'll give you this. She won't be bothering you again. Ever." He turned and walked away, the bodyguard falling into step beside him. Elena watched them disappear into the park's winding paths, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might give out again. She'd done it. She'd negotiated with a crime boss and walked away alive. More than alive, successful. Selina's fate was sealed now. The Marchettis would handle her with the brutal efficiency they were known for, and Victor would be left wondering how his mistress had vanished so completely, so suddenly. He'd suspect the Marchettis, maybe, but he'd never be able to prove it, and he'd certainly never suspect his fragile, recovering wife had orchestrated the entire thing. Elena left the park and took a cab back to the penthouse, her mind already moving to what came next. Victor would be home tomorrow. Selina would be gone, one way or another, within days. And then Elena could begin the final phase of her plan, the divorce. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't about punishing Victor or destroying Selina or proving she was strong enough to fight back. It was about freedom, real freedom, the kind that came from burning your old life to the ground and building something new from the ashes. That night, Elena slept better than she had in months. And when she dreamed of flight. Victor returned from his trip 2 days later looking like a man who'd aged a decade. The lines around his eyes had deepened, and there was a tightness to his jaw that spoke of sleepless nights and problems that wouldn't solve themselves no matter how much money or violence he threw at them. "How did it go?" Elena asked as he dropped his suitcase in the bedroom, though she already knew the answer. Barrett's updates had kept her informed of every meeting, every tense negotiation, every moment Victor had spent trying to plug the leaks in his organization. "Complicated," Victor said, loosening his tie. "We've got problems I'm still trying to sort out. Anything I can help with?" He looked at her with an expression that was almost tender. "No, but thank you for asking." He crossed to her and kissed her forehead. "It's good to be home. I missed you." The lie came so easily to him that Elena wondered if he even recognized it as one anymore. Or maybe he'd convinced himself it was true. Maybe he'd compartmentalized his life so completely that he could miss his wife while texting his mistress, could claim to love Elena while planning his next rendezvous with Selina. "I missed you too," Elena said, and the words felt like ash in her mouth. That evening, while Victor showered, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. Elena glanced at it and saw Selina's name flash across the screen. A text message. Her fingers moved before she could think about it, unlocking the phone with the passcode she'd watched Victor enter 100 times. The message was short but urgent. "We need to talk. Now. Not on this phone. Meet me at the usual place. 10 p.m. Elena's pulse quickened. Selina didn't know yet. She didn't know the Marchettis were coming for her. She was still operating as if everything was under control, as if her plans were proceeding exactly as she'd designed them. That confidence would be her downfall. Elena deleted the message and set the phone back down exactly as she'd found it. When Victor emerged from the bathroom 20 minutes later, she was curled up with a book, the picture of domestic tranquility. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Fine, just tired." He climbed into bed beside her. "I think I'll turn in early." But at 9:45, his phone buzzed again. This time he checked it, and Elena saw the tension immediately flood his body. "I need to go out," he said, already reaching for his clothes. "Something came up." "At this hour?" "It's important. Business." He was dressing quickly now, his movements sharp with urgency. "I won't be long." Elena watched him leave, counting to 60 after the elevator doors closed before she moved. Then she grabbed her phone and sent a message to Barrett. "He's going to meet her. I need to know what happens. My team is already in position. I'll send updates." Elena paced the penthouse, unable to sit still, her mind racing through possibilities. What would Selina tell Victor? Would she reveal that she knew about the Marchetti investigation? Would she try to convince him to run with her? Or would she simply demand that he finally choose between his wife and his mistress? The first update from Barrett came at 10:30. They're arguing. "Can't hear everything, but it's heated. She's crying. He looks angry, crying." That was interesting. Selina didn't strike Elena as the type to use tears as a weapon, which meant they were genuine. Which meant Selina was genuinely scared. Good. The second update arrived 15 minutes later. She just told him she's in danger, that people are watching her, that they need to leave the city. He's refusing. Elena's hands tightened on her phone. Selina was trying to recruit Victor into her escape plan, trying to convince him that the danger she faced, the danger Elena had orchestrated, was his danger too. But Victor was refusing, because despite everything, despite the affair and the lies and the betrayal, Victor Romano didn't run. His empire was here, his power was here, and he wouldn't abandon it, not even for the woman he'd risked everything to be with. The third update came at 11. He's leaving. She tried to stop him. He pushed her away. She's standing alone in the parking lot watching him drive off. She looks destroyed. Elena set down her phone and closed her eyes, letting herself feel the strange mixture of satisfaction and emptiness that came with this moment. Selena had lost Victor. Not to Elena, but to his own selfishness, his own inability to commit to anything that didn't serve his immediate interests. It was the exact punishment she deserved. Victor arrived home just after midnight, his expression dark and closed. He poured himself a scotch and drank it standing by the window, staring out at the city lights as if they held answers he couldn't find. "Bad meeting?" Elena asked softly. "You could say that." He didn't turn around. "Someone I trusted turned out to be someone I shouldn't have trusted." "I'm sorry." "Are you?" The question wasn't accusatory, just tired. "I wouldn't blame you if you weren't." Elena's breath caught. Did he know? Had he somehow figured out that she'd been the architect of Selena's downfall? "Why would you say that?" she asked carefully. Victor finally turned to face her. "Because I haven't been the husband you deserve. Because I've been distracted and distant and—" He trailed off, seeming to search for words he couldn't find. "Because you'd have every right to be glad when my chickens come home to roost." It wasn't a confession. Not quite. But it was close enough that Elena felt something shift between them. "I don't take pleasure in your problems, Victor," she said. And it was true. What she felt wasn't pleasure. It was justice. "I just want you to be honest with me." "About what?" "About everything." Elena stood and crossed to him, looking up into his face. "About where you've been. Who you've been with. What you want from this marriage." For a moment she thought he might actually tell her the truth. She saw the war playing out behind his eyes, the desire to confess battling with the instinct to protect himself. But in the end, protection won. "I want us to work," he said. "I want to be better, for you." It was the answer of a coward, a man who wanted absolution without having to face his sins. Elena stepped back. "Then be better, Victor, starting now." He nodded, but they both knew the words were empty. You couldn't rebuild trust without first acknowledging what broke it. And Victor would never acknowledge what he'd done because that would require admitting he was capable of being the villain in someone else's story. The next morning, Barrett's final message arrived. Selena Vale left her apartment at 6 a.m. with 2 suitcases and a one-way ticket to Montreal. She made it as far as the airport parking garage. Marchetti's people were waiting. She won't be bothering anyone anymore. Elena read the message 3 times, her coffee growing cold in her hands. She should feel something, she thought, triumph or guilt or satisfaction or horror, but all she felt was a distant sense of completion, like closing a book she'd been reading for too long. Selena was gone. The threat she'd posed, both to Victor's empire and to Elena's plans, had been neutralized. The Marchettis had their justice. And Victor would spend the rest of his life wondering what had happened to the woman he'd betrayed his wife for. Elena deleted the message and finished her coffee. That afternoon, while Victor was at his office trying to manage the chaos that Selena's disappearance had created in his organization, Elena made an appointment with the city's most ruthless divorce attorney. Margaret Chen, no relation to Elena's hospital doctor, though Elena appreciated the symmetry, had a reputation for destroying powerful men in divorce court. Her office was in a gleaming tower downtown, all glass and steel, and the kind of aggressive minimalism that announced you were about to lose everything you held dear. "Mrs. Romano," Margaret said, rising to shake Elena's hand. She was 60, silver-haired, with eyes that could calculate your net worth in seconds. "I was intrigued by your call. Your husband is a difficult man to divorce. Because of his connections. Because of his willingness to use those connections." Margaret gestured for Elena to sit. "I'll be frank with you. If you go through with this, it will get ugly. Victor Romano doesn't strike me as the type to let go gracefully." "I don't need graceful," Elena said. "I need effective." "Then you've come to the right place." Margaret opened a leather portfolio. "Tell me everything." Elena spent the next 2 hours laying out the foundation of her marriage. The prenuptial agreement Victor had insisted on, protecting his assets, leaving her with almost nothing if they divorced. The way she'd disappeared into his life, giving up her own career aspirations to be the perfect wife. the emotional distance that had grown between them over the years, and finally, carefully, the cardiac episode that had revealed just how little she meant to him when it mattered most. She didn't mention the affair. Not yet. That would come later, when the time was right. Margaret took notes with the precision of a surgeon planning an operation. When Elena finished, she sat back and studied her newest client with undisguised approval. "You're more prepared than 90% of the women who walk through that door," she said. "Most of them come in angry and emotional. You're coming in strategic." "I had time to think while I was recovering," Elena said. "Time to understand that anger without strategy is just noise." "Smart." Margaret tapped her pen against her notepad. "Here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to quietly document every asset your husband has. And I mean everything. Bank accounts, properties, investments, shell companies, offshore holdings, all of it. New York is an equitable distribution state, which means, regardless of that prenup, you're entitled to a fair share of marital assets. The prenup was signed under duress," Margaret interrupted smoothly. "You were young in love, and your husband, a powerful man with significant resources and connections, pressured you into signing without independent legal counsel. We'll argue that it's unconscionable and should be thrown out." Elena's eyes widened. "Can we actually do that?" "We can try. And even if we fail, the attempt will cost him legal fees and time and put him on the defensive." Margaret smiled. "The goal isn't just to win, Mrs. Romano. It's to make winning so expensive and exhausting for him that he'd rather settle than fight." "How long will this take?" 6 months. Maybe a year. Depends on how hard he fights." Margaret leaned forward. "But I need to ask you something. Are you absolutely certain this is what you want? Because once we file, there's no going back. Your husband will know. And based on what I know about Victor Romano, his response won't be gentle." Elena thought about the night on the kitchen floor, the 3 unanswered calls, the hospital bed where she'd whispered, "You didn't come." The weeks she'd spent gathering evidence and building her case and transforming herself from victim to strategist. "I'm certain," she said. "Good." Margaret closed her portfolio. "Then let's destroy him." They spent another hour discussing strategy, when to file, how to protect Elena's safety, what to expect from Victor's legal team. By the time Elena left the office, she had a plan, a timeline, and a retainer agreement that would have made most people blanch. But money wasn't an issue. Elena had been quietly moving funds from their joint accounts into a separate account in her name, small amounts that wouldn't trigger any alerts. She'd accumulated enough to pay for the best representation money could buy. Walking back through the city streets, Elena felt lighter than she had in years. The plan was in motion. Selena was gone. Victor was vulnerable. And Elena was finally in control of her own life. But as she turned the corner toward her building, she saw something that made her blood run cold. Victor's Mercedes was already parked in front of the building. He was home early. And standing beside his car, talking to him with urgent gestures, was one of his security team, a man Elena recognized as Marcus, who handled Victor's most sensitive operations. She was too far away to hear what they were saying, but she could read body language. Marcus was agitated. Victor's face was dark with fury. And as Elena watched, Victor pulled out his phone and made a call, his movements sharp and violent. Something had happened, something big. Elena's mind raced through possibilities. Had the Marchettis contacted him about Selena? Had someone in his organization finally revealed the depth of the infiltration? Had he somehow discovered that Elena had been investigating him? She forced herself to walk normally toward the building, to smile at the doorman, to act as if nothing was wrong. By the time she reached the lobby, Victor and Marcus had moved inside to the garage. She took the elevator up alone, her heart pounding, her mind preparing for whatever came next. The penthouse was silent when she entered. Elena set down her bag and moved through the rooms, looking for any sign of Victor. She found him in his study, standing behind his desk with his phone pressed to his ear. "I don't care what it takes," he was saying, his voice low and dangerous. "I want to know who gave that information to the Marchettis. Someone in my organization sold me out, and when I find out who, they're going to wish they'd never been born." Elena's stomach dropped. He knew. Not about her specifically, but he knew that someone had fed information to the Marchettis, that someone had betrayed him. Victor looked up and saw her in the doorway. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Suspicion, maybe. Or just the paranoia of a man who no longer knew who to trust. "I have to go," he said into the phone, and ended the call. Elena. I didn't hear you come in. What's wrong? She asked, genuine concern in her voice. You look upset. Business problems. Nothing you need to worry about. But his eyes were still on her, assessing, calculating. Where were you this afternoon? I had a doctor's appointment, follow-up with the cardiologist. The lie came easily. She'd actually had an appointment scheduled for next week, but she'd memorized the details in case she needed an alibi. Why? Just wondering. Victor moved around the desk toward her. How did it go? Fine. She says my heart is healing well. I should be back to normal in another few weeks. That's good. He trailed off, his attention already drifting back to whatever crisis was consuming him. I'm glad you're okay, Elena. I really am. There was something in his tone that made Elena's chest tighten. Regret, maybe. Or the beginning of understanding that he'd failed her in ways he couldn't fix. Victor, she said carefully, whatever's happening with your business, is it dangerous? Should I be worried? He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw him making a decision, weighing how much to tell her, how much to protect her with ignorance. No, he said finally. You're safe. I'll make sure of that. But I need you to do something for me. What? If anyone contacts you, anyone you don't know, anyone asking questions about me or my business, I need you to tell me immediately. Don't talk to them. Don't trust them. Just tell me. Elena's pulse quickened. You're scaring me. I don't mean to. Victor pulled her into his arms, and for a moment, Elena let herself lean into the embrace. Let herself remember what it felt like when she'd believed his protection meant something. I just need to know you're safe. That you're on my side. I'm your wife, Elena said against his chest. Of course I'm on your side. It was the biggest lie she'd ever told. That night, Elena lay awake long after Victor fell asleep, listening to the sounds of the city outside their window. Sirens in the distance, the occasional car horn, the white noise of millions of lives unfolding in the darkness. Victor's paranoia was growing. He was looking for the traitor in his organization, and sooner or later his investigation would lead him to uncomfortable questions. Questions about timing and opportunity, and who had the most to gain from his downfall. Elena needed to accelerate her timeline. She needed to file for divorce before Victor's suspicions turned toward her. Because once he started seeing her as an enemy instead of a victim, once he started treating her the way he treated all his enemies, her safety would evaporate. She waited until Victor's breathing deepened into true sleep, then slipped out of bed and went to the study. She sent an encrypted message to Margaret Chen. We need to file sooner than we discussed. How quickly can you have the papers ready? The response came back within minutes. Margaret apparently also didn't sleep. I can have them ready by Friday, but that only gives us 3 days to finalize asset documentation. Are you sure you want to rush this? Elena thought about Victor's question earlier. Where were you? The suspicion in his eyes, the way he'd asked her to report anyone who contacted her, as if he was already building a web to catch whoever had betrayed him. I'm sure, she typed back. Friday. Then Friday it is. I'll have the papers delivered to you for review Thursday night. Once you sign them, we file them with the court Friday morning. After that, everything happens fast. How fast? Your husband will be served the papers Friday afternoon. By Friday evening, the whole city will know Victor Romano's wife is divorcing him. By Monday, the media will have the story. By next month, we'll be in court. Elena stared at the message, her finger hovering over the keyboard. This was it, the point of absolute no return. Once those papers were filed, once Victor knew she was leaving him, everything would change. His reaction would be swift and probably brutal. He'd fight her with every weapon he had, money, lawyers, connections, possibly even violence. But Elena had weapons too. She had evidence of the affair, even if Selena was gone. She had documentation of his criminal activities, gathered carefully over weeks. She had the sympathy of being the wronged wife who'd nearly died while her husband cheated. And most importantly, she had the truth on her side. Do it, Elena typed. File on Friday. She cleared the browser history, shut down the computer, and returned to bed. Beside her, Victor slept on, oblivious to the fact that his wife had just set in motion the destruction of everything they'd built together. 3 days, Elena thought. 3 days until freedom. She closed her eyes and waited for morning. Thursday arrived with the kind of gray, heavy sky that promised snow. Elena spent the day in a state of carefully controlled calm, going through her normal routine while internally cataloging everything she needed to do. Margaret's papers would arrive tonight. Tomorrow morning, they'd be filed. Tomorrow afternoon, Victor would know. She needed to be ready. While Victor was at the office, Elena packed a bag. Not obviously, just a few essential items hidden in the back of her closet. Medications. Important documents. Cash she'd been withdrawing in small amounts for weeks. The evidence Barrett had compiled, copied to a secure drive. Photographs from their early years together, the ones where she still looked happy. She wasn't sure why she packed those last items. Sentiment, maybe. Or just the need to remember who she'd been before all of this. The woman who'd believed in love and happy endings and the power of commitment to overcome anything. That woman seemed like a stranger now. At 6 o'clock, Elena's phone buzzed with a message from Margaret's office. Courier delivering package at 7 p.m. Sign as Sarah Miller. Don't let your husband see it. Elena deleted the message and waited. Victor came home at 6:30, looking exhausted. He'd been spending 18-hour days at the office, trying to shore up his operations against whatever threats he imagined were circling. The paranoia was wearing on him. Elena could see it in the tightness around his eyes, the way he startled at unexpected sounds. Long day? She asked. Endless. He loosened his tie and poured himself a drink. I'm going to take a shower and then I think I'll just go to bed. Unless you want to have dinner? I'm not very hungry, Elena lied. You go ahead. Rest. She watched him disappear into the bedroom, counting the minutes. At exactly 7 o'clock, the doorman called up. Mrs. Romano, there's a courier here with a package for Sarah Miller. Should I send them up? Yes, please, Elena said, keeping her voice calm even as her heart raced. She met the courier at the door, signed for the package, and slipped back inside before Victor emerged from the shower. The envelope was thick, professional, and utterly damning. Elena hid it in her closet, beneath the sweater she never wore, and returned to the living room with her book. When Victor came out 20 minutes later, she was the picture of domestic tranquility, his wife, reading peacefully, waiting for him. I think I'll just go to bed, he said. I'm exhausted. Of course. Sleep well. Elena waited until she heard his breathing deepen, then retrieved the envelope from its hiding place and went to the study. She opened it carefully, her hands trembling slightly, and began to read. The divorce petition was 43 pages of legal precision. It laid out the grounds for divorce, irreconcilable differences, abandonment, emotional cruelty. It listed every asset Elena knew about, and probably several Victor thought she didn't know existed. It requested equitable distribution of all marital property, spousal support, and attorney's fees. And attached to it was a separate document, a motion to invalidate the prenuptial agreement based on the circumstances under which it had been signed. Elena read every word, made 2 minor corrections, and signed her name at the bottom of each page. Her signature looked strange to her. Elena Romano, a name she'd carried for 7 years and would soon shed like old skin. She sealed the documents in the return envelope Margaret had provided and set it by the door for pickup in the morning. Then she sat in the darkness of the study, listening to the silence of the penthouse, and thought about what tomorrow would bring. Victor would be served at his office. He'd read the papers and realized that his wife, his quiet, fragile, forgiving wife, had been planning this for weeks. That she knew about the affair, about his business, about everything he'd tried to hide. That she wasn't asking for mercy or reconciliation. She was demanding justice. His first reaction would be shock, then anger, then the cold, calculating fury of a man who'd been outmaneuvered by someone he'd underestimated. And Elena needed to not be here when that fury found its target. She pulled out her phone and sent a message to a number she'd saved weeks ago but never called. I need a place to stay, starting tomorrow, somewhere he can't find me. Can you help? The response came from Barrett within minutes. Already arranged, safe house in Brooklyn. Address below. Key will be waiting for you. It's secure, untraceable, and available as long as you need it. Elena memorized the address and deleted the message. Then she went to the bedroom, lay down beside her husband one last time, and waited for the sun to rise on the last day of her marriage. Tomorrow, she thought. Tomorrow everything burns, and from the ashes she would rise alone. Friday morning arrived with pale winter sunlight cutting through the bedroom curtains. Elena woke before the alarm, her body already preparing for what was coming. Beside her, Victor slept heavily, one arm thrown across his face, exhausted from another week of paranoia and crisis management. She studied his face in the early light, the man she'd married at 25, the man she'd believed would protect her from everything, The man who'd let her die alone while he chose someone else. He looked older now, worn down by the weight of his own choices. Part of her, a very small part, almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Elena slipped out of bed and dressed quickly in jeans and a sweater, practical clothes for someone who'd be moving through the city unseen. She made coffee, poured Victor a cup, and left it on his nightstand like she did every morning. The familiar ritual felt strange now, knowing it was the last time. "You're up early," Victor mumbled, his eyes still closed. "Couldn't sleep." Elena kept her voice light. "I thought I'd go for a walk, clear my head. It's cold out. I'll bundle up." She kissed his forehead, a goodbye he didn't know was a goodbye. "Go back to sleep. You need the rest." He caught her hand, holding it for a moment. "Elena?" "Yes?" I know things haven't been good lately, but I want you to know that you're important to me. That you matter." The words should have meant something weeks ago. Now they were just noise, the sound of a man trying to convince himself he was better than his actions proved. "I know, Victor," Elena said softly. "I know." She left him there and walked out of the penthouse with only her purse and the bag she'd hidden by the door. The doorman wished her a good morning, and Elena smiled back, wondering if he'd remember this moment later when the police came asking questions. The courier pickup happened at exactly 8 o'clock. Elena handed over the sealed envelope containing the signed divorce papers and watched it disappear into the morning traffic. By 9, those papers would be filed with the court. By noon, they'd be served to Victor at his office. By then, Elena would be gone. She took a cab to the Brooklyn address Barrett had provided, a brownstone in a quiet neighborhood where no one paid attention to strangers. The key was exactly where he'd said it would be, and the apartment inside was sparse but clean, a place to disappear, a place to wait. Elena set down her bag and pulled out her phone. She had one more message to send before everything exploded. The text went to a number she'd obtained through Barrett's investigation, a federal prosecutor named Sarah Hendricks, who specialized in organized crime. Elena had debated for weeks whether to take this final step, whether revenge was worth potentially destroying Victor completely. But as she sat in the safe house, thinking about the 3 unanswered calls and the cardiac episode and the months of calculated betrayal, the decision became simple. Victor had made his choices. Now he'd live with the consequences. "You don't know me, but I have information about Victor Romano's operations. Financial records, shipping manifests, communications with Carlo Marchetti. Everything you'd need to build a case. I'll deliver it to you if you guarantee my safety and immunity from prosecution." Elena hit send before she could second-guess herself. Then she waited. The response came faster than she expected. "This is Sarah Hendricks. I'm very interested in what you have. Where and when can we meet?" Elena typed back an address. A coffee shop in Manhattan, public and safe. "Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. Come alone. I'll find you." "Agreed. And Mrs. Romano, thank you for reaching out." Elena stared at the message. The prosecutor already knew who she was. Of course she did. Sarah Hendricks had probably been investigating Victor for years, waiting for someone on the inside to crack, and now Elena was handing her everything she needed. The morning crawled by. Elena forced herself to eat, to breathe, to stay calm. At 11:45, her phone buzzed with a message from Margaret Chen. "Papers filed. Your husband will be served in approximately 20 minutes. Are you somewhere safe?" "Yes," Elena replied. "I'm ready." She wasn't sure that was true, but it was too late to matter now. At 12:17, her phone exploded with calls from Victor. She watched his name flash across the screen once, twice, 5 times, 10 times. She didn't answer. Instead, she turned off the phone completely and sat in the silence of the safe house, imagining the scene playing out across the city. Victor in his office, confident and in control, when his secretary announces a courier. The manila envelope placed on his desk. The moment he opens it and sees the words "Petition for Divorce" at the top of the first page. The shock giving way to disbelief, giving way to rage. Elena wondered if he'd call his lawyers first or if he'd come looking for her immediately. She wondered if any part of him would understand why she'd done this, or if his ego was too large to comprehend that the woman he'd underestimated had been planning his destruction for weeks. 6 hours passed in the safe house before Elena turned her phone back on. The screen immediately lit up with notifications, 37 missed calls from Victor, 23 text messages that started as confusion and escalated to fury. "Elena, what is this? Call me immediately. This is insane. Whatever you think you know, we can talk about it. You're making a huge mistake. Answer your phone. Where are you? Come home now. Don't do this, please. You have no idea what you're doing. The people I work with, this puts you in danger. Answer me. The progression from shock to anger to threats to something that might have been genuine fear was almost fascinating. Elena read them all without emotion, clinical in her assessment. Victor had moved through every stage except acceptance. He still thought he could control this, control her. He'd learn otherwise soon enough. The next message wasn't from Victor. It was from an unknown number. Mrs. Romano, this is James Barrett. Just wanted to confirm you're secure. Also, you should know your husband has hired a PI firm to find you. They're good, but not good enough. You're safe where you are. Don't go back to any familiar locations. Elena sent back a quick thank you and deleted the thread. Then she settled in for a long night of waiting. Saturday morning dawned gray and cold. Elena dressed carefully for her meeting with Sarah Hendricks. Professional but not intimidating, sympathetic but not weak. The woman who'd survived her husband's betrayal and decided to do the right thing. The coffee shop was crowded when she arrived, full of weekend brunchers and people escaping their apartments. Elena spotted the prosecutor immediately, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and an air of barely contained intensity. She was sitting alone at a corner table, a folder open in front of her. Elena approached and sat down without preamble. Ms. Hendricks. Mrs. Romano. Sarah studied her with the focus of someone trained to read people. Thank you for reaching out. What you're offering could be extremely valuable to an ongoing investigation. I want immunity, Elena said directly. Complete immunity from any prosecution related to my husband's activities, and I want protection if he retaliates. Done. Sarah slid a document across the table. I had this prepared based on our conversation yesterday. It guarantees immunity and places you in witness protection if necessary. All I need is your signature and whatever evidence you have. Elena read the document carefully, looking for traps or loopholes. Finding none, she signed and pulled a flash drive from her purse. This contains financial records, shipping manifests, communications between Victor and various associates, including the Marchetti family, and documented instances of money laundering, illegal imports, and extortion. It's comprehensive. Sarah took the drive like it was made of gold. How did you obtain all this? I hired an investigator. After I had a cardiac episode and nearly died because my husband was too busy with his mistress to answer my calls, I started paying attention to things I'd ignored for years. I'm not proud that I looked the other way for so long, but I'm trying to make it right now. The cardiac episode, that's documented? Hospital records, doctor's statements, everything you need. Elena's voice was steady. Victor Romano isn't a good man, Ms. Hendricks. He's built an empire on violence and corruption, and he's gotten away with it because people are too scared to stand up to him. I'm not scared anymore. Something like respect flickered in Sarah's eyes. What you're doing takes extraordinary courage. It's not courage, Elena corrected. It's survival. Victor would have destroyed me eventually, one way or another. This way, I get to destroy him first. Sarah plugged the flash drive into her laptop and began scrolling through the files, her expression growing more satisfied with each document. This is Mrs. Romano. This is exactly what we've been trying to build for 3 years. With this evidence, we can bring charges for money laundering, racketeering, conspiracy, possibly even RICO violations. How long until you arrest him? We'll need to verify everything first, cross-reference with our own investigation. But if it's as solid as it appears, I'd estimate 2 weeks, maybe 3. Sarah closed the laptop and looked directly at Elena. You understand what's going to happen when we do this. Your husband will know you're the source. His associates will know. You'll be marked as the woman who brought down Victor Romano. I understand. And you're prepared for that? Elena thought about the hospital bed, the divorce papers, the systematic dismantling of everything Victor thought he controlled. I'm prepared for whatever comes next. I've already lost everything that mattered. He can't hurt me anymore. Sarah extended her hand. Then we have a deal. I'll be in touch as the investigation proceeds. In the meantime, stay somewhere secure. Don't contact your husband or anyone associated with him. And Mrs. Romano? Thank you. This is going to make a difference. Elena shook her hand and left the coffee shop feeling lighter than she had in months. The final piece was in place. Victor's criminal empire would crumble. His businesses would be seized, his associates would scatter, and Elena would be free, truly free for the first time since she'd married him. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange limbo. Elena stayed in the Brooklyn safe house, venturing out only for essentials and always watching to make sure she wasn't followed. Margaret Chen kept her updated on the divorce proceedings. Victor had hired 3 different law firms and was fighting every single point with vicious determination. "He's not making this easy," Margaret reported during one of their encrypted video calls. "He's claiming you abandoned the marriage, that you're mentally unstable from the cardiac episode, that the prenup is ironclad. He's even trying to argue that you're not entitled to anything because you didn't contribute financially to the marriage. Can he win? Not a chance." Margaret's smile was predatory. "I have medical records showing he ignored your emergency calls. I have hotel receipts from the Riverside. And thanks to your investigator, I have evidence of assets he failed to disclose. The judge is not going to be sympathetic to a man who cheated on his wife while she was dying and then lied about his wealth in court. How long until we settle? He'll drag it out as long as possible, 6 months, maybe a year. But Mrs. Romano, you need to understand something. Your husband isn't fighting this divorce because he loves you or wants to save the marriage. He's fighting because he can't stand losing, especially to you." "Good," Elena said. "Let him lose. Let him understand what it feels like to be powerless." On the 15th day after Elena had delivered the evidence to Sarah Hendricks, the news broke. It started with a press conference, the U.S. attorney announcing a major indictment against Victor Romano and 17 of his associates on charges of money laundering, racketeering, conspiracy, and operating a continuing criminal enterprise. The charges carried potential sentences of decades in federal prison. Elena watched the press conference on her laptop, volume low, her expression neutral. She saw Victor's photograph flash across the screen, his corporate headshot, looking powerful and confident. She saw footage of federal agents raiding his offices, his warehouses, his properties across the city. She saw the talking heads on cable news dissecting his empire and speculating about his downfall. And she felt nothing but cold satisfaction. Within hours, Victor's lawyers released a statement denying all charges and claiming political persecution. Within days, his business associates began flipping, making deals with prosecutors to testify against him in exchange for reduced sentences. Within a week, the media had connected the dots between the criminal indictment and Elena's divorce filing, and suddenly she was thrust into a spotlight she'd never wanted. The narrative the press created was almost too perfect. The loyal wife who nearly died while her husband cheated, who then discovered the depths of his criminal activities and had the courage to expose him. Elena became a symbol overnight. The woman who'd stood up to a monster and won. It wasn't quite accurate. She hadn't exposed Victor out of noble civic duty. She'd done it because he'd betrayed her, and she'd wanted him to pay. But the media didn't need complexity. They needed heroes and villains, and Elena was happy to let them cast her in the hero's role if it meant Victor wore the villains. The first time she saw him after the divorce papers were filed was on television, being led out of a courthouse in handcuffs. The arraignment had been denied bail, the judge calling him a flight risk given his resources and international connections. Victor would await trial from a federal detention center. Elena studied his face on the screen, looking for any trace of the man she'd married. She found only rage and disbelief, the expression of someone who'd never imagined the consequences could actually reach him. Margaret called her that evening. "He's asking to speak with you." "Absolutely not." "I told him that. But Elena, he's desperate. His lawyers are advising him to take a plea deal, but he's refusing. He thinks if he can just talk to you, he can convince you to recant your statement to the prosecutors." Elena laughed, a sound without humor. "Does he actually believe I'd help him now?" "I think he believes you still love him, that despite everything, you'll save him because that's what you've always done." "Then he doesn't know me at all," Elena said quietly. "He's never known me. He knew the woman I pretended to be to keep him happy. That woman died on my kitchen floor. Tell his lawyers no, and tell Victor that if he contacts me again, I'll file for a restraining order." "Understood." Margaret paused. "For what it's worth, you're doing the right thing, not just for yourself, but for every woman he would have hurt in the future." After the call ended, Elena stood by the window of the safe house, looking out at the Brooklyn street below. A woman walking her dog. A couple laughing as they carried groceries. Ordinary people living ordinary lives, unaware that a few miles away, an empire was collapsing. She thought about Victor in his cell, probably still convinced that this was all a misunderstanding, that his money and connections would save him eventually, that Elena would crack and come back to him. He'd learned the truth during the trial. The trial began 4 months later, in late spring, when the city had finally shaken off winter's grip. Elena was called to testify on the third day, and she prepared for it like she was preparing for battle. Margaret had coached her extensively. Answer only what they ask. Don't volunteer information. Don't let the defense attorneys bait you into showing emotion. You're the sympathetic wife who was kept in the dark about her husband's activities until your near-death experience made you start asking questions. It was close enough to the truth that Elena could sell it convincingly. The courthouse was surrounded by media when she arrived, cameras flashing as she walked up the steps in a simple navy dress and minimal jewelry. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman who'd survived and was now seeking justice. Inside the courtroom, she took the stand and swore to tell the truth. Her eyes found Victor at the defense table, and for the first time in months, they looked directly at each other. He looked terrible, thinner, grayer, with the kind of exhaustion that came from months of detention and the slow realization that he was truly, completely defeated. When their eyes met, she saw him mouth 2 words. "I'm sorry." Elena looked away. The prosecution took her through her testimony methodically. Her marriage to Victor, her medical emergency, the discovery of the affair, the decision to investigate what else he might be hiding, the evidence she'd uncovered, the choice to bring it to authorities rather than let it continue. "Mrs. Romano," the prosecutor asked, "when you discovered the extent of your husband's criminal activities, why didn't you simply divorce him quietly? Why did you feel compelled to bring this evidence to law enforcement?" Elena looked directly at the jury as she answered, "Because I realized that my husband had built his empire on hurting people, exploiting them, taking advantage of the vulnerable, and I'd benefited from that empire without asking questions. I'd lived in luxury purchased with money earned through suffering, and I couldn't live with that anymore. So I chose to do the right thing, even though it meant losing everything." It was a good answer, a noble answer, and it was even partially true. The defense attorney's cross-examination was brutal. He tried to paint Elena as a bitter wife seeking revenge. He questioned her mental state following the cardiac episode. He suggested she'd manufactured or exaggerated evidence. But Elena held her ground, answering calmly and precisely, never losing her composure. When she finally stepped down from the stand 3 hours later, she felt Victor's eyes on her back as she walked out of the courtroom. She didn't look back. The trial lasted 6 weeks. The evidence was overwhelming, not just what Elena had provided, but what the prosecutors had built around it. Former associates testified against Victor in exchange for lighter sentences. Financial experts detailed the money laundering schemes. Federal agents explained the surveillance they'd conducted. The verdict came back on a Tuesday afternoon, guilty on all counts. Victor Romano would spend the next 25 years in federal prison. Elena heard the news in the safe house, alone, her phone silent in her hands. She'd won. Completely, utterly won. Victor's empire was destroyed, his freedom gone, his reputation shattered beyond repair. And she was free. Free of the marriage, free of his shadow, free to build whatever life she wanted. So why did she feel so empty? The divorce was finalized 3 weeks after the verdict. With Victor's assets seized by the federal government, there wasn't much to fight over. Elena received a settlement that was modest compared to what she might have gotten, but more than enough to start over. The prenup was thrown out, just as Margaret had predicted, and the judge made it clear in his ruling that he had no sympathy for a convicted criminal trying to hide assets from his wife. On the day the divorce was official, Elena signed the final papers in Margaret's office and walked out into the Manhattan sunshine as Elena Chen, taking back her maiden name, reclaiming the identity she'd lost when she became Mrs. Romano. "What will you do now?" Margaret asked as they said goodbye. "I don't know," Elena admitted. "I've spent so long planning Victor's destruction that I haven't thought about what comes after." "Then that's your next project," Margaret said with a slight smile. "Figuring out who Elena Chen wants to be." Elena spent the summer traveling, something she'd never done before. She went to Italy alone, saw the Amalfi Coast that Victor had once promised to take her to. She walked through Rome and Florence and Venice, anonymous in the crowds of tourists, no longer the wife of someone important, but just another woman rediscovering the world. She visited her parents. Her mother, who'd never liked Victor, welcomed her home with tears and fierce hugs. Her father, who'd warned her 7 years ago that Victor Romano was dangerous, simply held her and said, "I'm glad you're safe." In September, Elena returned to New York and made a decision. She used part of her divorce settlement to start a foundation, an organization dedicated to helping women escape abusive relationships, providing them with legal assistance, safe housing, and the resources they needed to rebuild their lives. She called it Second Chances, and she poured herself into it with the same focused intensity she'd used to destroy Victor. The foundation opened its doors in October, and within months they were helping dozens of women navigate divorces, restraining orders, custody battles. Elena hired the best lawyers she could afford, including Margaret Chen as a consultant, and made sure every woman who came to them received the same level of expertise that had saved her. She never talked about her own story publicly. She didn't need to. The media had already told it 1,000 times. Instead, she worked quietly behind the scenes, using the knowledge she'd gained from her own nightmare to help others survive theirs. On the first anniversary of her cardiac episode, Elena visited the hospital where Dr. Chen had saved her life. She found the doctor in the emergency room, finishing her shift. "Mrs. Rowe," Dr. Chen caught herself. "Ms. Chen, I wasn't expecting to see you." "I wanted to thank you," Elena said, "for saving my life that night. I know it's been a year, but I never properly thanked you." Dr. Chen smiled. "You're looking well. Remarkably well, actually. How's your heart?" "Stronger than it's ever been," Elena said, and meant it in every possible way. She left the hospital and walked through the city as evening fell, watching the lights come on across Manhattan. Somewhere in a federal prison, Victor Romano was living in a cell barely bigger than their walk-in closet. Somewhere, the women she'd helped through Second Chances were building new lives. Somewhere, Selena Vale's story had ended in whatever way the Marchettis had decided. And Elena was here, walking through the city alone but not lonely, free but not lost, damaged but not broken. She pulled out her phone and opened the Notes app, where she'd been keeping a journal of sorts. The entry for today was simple. 1 year ago, I died on my kitchen floor. 1 year ago, my husband chose someone else. 1 year ago, I learned that the only person who could save me was myself. Today, I'm alive. I'm free. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. The heart they said was broken has healed, not the way it was before. Stronger. Different. Mine. Elena closed the phone and continued walking as the first snow of the season began to fall. Behind her, the ghost of who she'd been faded into the city lights. Ahead of her stretched the rest of her life, unwritten and full of possibility. She'd burned her old world to the ground and risen from the ashes. And she'd never felt more alive. The woman Victor Romano had underestimated, the wife he'd betrayed, the victim he'd created. That woman no longer existed. In her place stood Elena Chen, survivor and architect of her own salvation, a woman who'd learned that sometimes the only way to save yourself was to destroy everything trying to kill you. Winter settled over the city, cold and clean and new, and Elena walked into it with her head high, her heart whole, and her future entirely her own. The story of her destruction had become the story of her rebirth, and she was just getting started.